Hi, this is Mary Harris from Paper Crow. Today I thought I would bring you a slower version of building a master board and using it, this time more in a tutorial style. Feel free to mute me if you don't want to listen to every little detail and just want to follow along, but we're going to do it a little slower today. I made a sample master board here, and for those of you who don't know, a master board is one piece that has mixed media on it that can be then cut up into smaller pieces to put into a book so you can have more of a cohesive look to your book. And sometimes people split them between multiple books, but it's a way of doing one big project to make smaller projects. So one square page can make this many pieces. So we have a couple of bookmarks, a little tuck strip that goes across a page. This can be a tuck or it can be turned into a bookmark. We have a couple of pockets. This is a double pocket, so you can put something here and then put something behind it once you secure it in the page. And this is a pocket that then opens up to be usually a writing surface. You can put some writing paper in there, and if you glue it in with an empty slot, you can make that into a pocket up there also. So to start off with, we're going to make something that looks similar to this. We want a 12-inch by 12-inch piece of paper, and we are going to add a multitude of different mediums to make it as busy as possible, because then when you cut it up, you're really only taking a small section of that bigger piece. Now I'm about to work on some Halloween books, so I would like to pick paper that goes along with that sort of Halloween fall theme. I love this book for doing the sort of neutral woodsy-ish type style. So I'm going to pull one from here, maybe an orangish color since it is a Halloween style. And I want to pull some pages from books to use for scraps. So this is just an old book. I don't know year, but it's pretty worn out. It's pretty yellowed. I don't have to do anything to age this paper, so I'm pulling a couple of those sheets. I picked up some children's books at a secondhand store. So I have this All Hallows Eve. It's kind of a misprint. So there's a lot of pages in here that have the Halloween vibe to them that we can use. And we're not really taking anything away from the kids because it looks like it was thrown out just because it's a misprint and the pages are a little weird. The other one I have is Barn Dance. It's more of like the fall type of images. So we have nighttime stuff. This is sort of a spooky old house looking image. I also picked up from Michael's a 12 by 12 that is specifically Halloween. And I don't know if I'll use it on the initial work, but there's like spider webs in here, some different like writing and different bugs, I think, if you get into it. Here's a haunted house. So it's good for laying over because it's see-through. You can put it over another page and it will hint through. So if I take this image of the night sky and put it over, you can kind of see through it a little bit. If it's a brighter color, it's going to show up a little bit better. So here's some music notes. You can see that better through there. So we're going to keep some of this on standby because I'll probably use some of it at some point. I have some pre-printed papers that already have a pattern on them as kind of some extras. This is just like a hodgepodge of leftovers from different projects that I kind of have on the side here. I'm going to start off by ripping up these extra pages, and I tend to go quickly when I rip them up. I don't like to put a whole lot of thought into it because I'll overthink it, and really we're going to be ripping them so small I don't really need to get too worried about it. It's going to be covered up with multiple levels of paper and paint and ink. So one thing I do make sure I do is I get rid of the straight edges, because when you go to put all those elements together, it just doesn't do it justice to have random straight edges in the middle of the page. But you may love it. Everybody has their own style. I try to make sure that my tears are not all straight. Are, you know, not squared off. I want to have some triangular and kind of lopsided ones. In other words, it just looks too symmetrical. We don't want that. Alright, there's a couple down. I don't want the barn dance, and I don't want these random words on the side, so I'm going to tear those off. And then I'm actually going to tear up this house a little bit. I don't want it to be the whole image anywhere on there, because we're going to break it down into such small pieces anyway. So it'll have a little bit of house in a couple different spots throughout the paper. I'm going to take these straight edges off of the owl sheet also. I like using book pages better than magazine pages. Magazine pages are, nowadays, the newer ones are very, very thin, and they're coated so that when you go to try to put them down on the paper, they're more likely to wrinkle. So either getting old magazines or children's books for the images. Some nonfiction books will have great images. You just want to make sure the pages are thick enough to be able to take a little bit of liquid without wrinkling up. That one's probably too big, but... Alright, so we're getting our pile going here. I'm going to set these to the side. I'm actually recording this at night because I could not rally this morning to do anything creative for some reason. I felt like I hadn't slept in a month. I ended up just sleeping away my morning. But I came home from work with a little bit more creativity in me. These ones tear really easily. They're a bit fragile, but once we get them glued down, you won't even be able to tell the difference. Alright, so to glue it down, we're going to actually use matte medium. It is a little bit thick, but it's not as runny as some glues and other types of products that are used to stick them down. Dries very clear, so you can use it both under and over the top of what you're working on and still be able to see the image. I'm going to start off with lettering. In my time-lapsed version of this, it looks like it takes only 30 seconds, but really I tend to spend a lot of time thinking about placement and spreading things out. I try to do the odd rule, where you don't want things to be symmetrical. You want to keep an odd number so that if you do have something off center, if you're trying to do symmetrical, it gets harder to keep things perfect. So like you see having these 4 down, I'm going to pick it apart more than if I have a 5th odd one somewhere that's off center. All of a sudden, whether it's symmetrical doesn't matter anymore. We're going to add some dark on and making sure to overlap. I squirt the gel right onto, or matte medium, right onto the page because I know I'm going to use it all. It takes so much to really get things stuck down, and anything left over you can always rub in over the top to kind of seal things in, so it never goes to waste. I'm going to put this owl in there, but I just know I'm going to end up having to cut him in half at some point here. I do have a tendency to kind of let them hang over the edge too, because I can cut that off later. I'm looking more for how it lines up on the paper, and the rest can be dealt with later. And I don't really, when I put it together, I'm not thinking about how I'll cut the page later, because I can figure that out as I go. Oop, we want to go try to keep the images. I don't do straight up and upside down, but I do try to put them at different angles. For the first stage, that's pretty good. I'm going to thin out any clumps that I have. This is going to have many coats of things over it, so if you didn't catch every inch of it, it's okay. But we do want to dry it, so I'm going to use a heat gun. You can just walk away from it and come back and finish the video later, or you can use a hair dryer. That works really well. I have one of these style of heat tools that dries it quickly, but you do have to be careful with this that you don't cook it. You know, it'll start to bubble up if you get it too hot. So give me 1 second, I'll be right back. All right, it's pretty dry. It might be a little tacky, but it's dry enough that I can put a stencil against it and it won't get stuck. So you just want to make sure that it's not too tacky. I'm going to start off by using some ink with a stencil. So I like to start off lighter and go darker. It's just easier when it comes to using the sponges that I use. There are a lot of different, you can use a makeup brush, you can use a sponge like this, you can just use a kitchen sponge if you really want to. You're going to place your stencil down. Like I said with the gluing things down, you want to make sure you're getting the edge. So it's good to kind of overlap the edge with your stencil. So when you're putting your color down, you don't forget to get it a little bit of everywhere. If for some reason you get it on something you don't want it on, like if it gets over onto your well, in this case, this is a board for cutting. What you can take most paints and inks off with the baby wipe. It's not a for sure. Some stuff it doesn't work with, but keep them handy. And if you catch it right away, usually you can get it to come up. If you don't want to risk it, you can always stick a piece of scratch paper underneath when you're doing an edge. I'm going to transition from green to charcoal black. Now since we're going kind of Halloween colors, I think I might want to, ooh, that looks really sharp. You might want to add some more orange-ish colors. I don't want to go too bright because I kind of have like a earthy color scheme going on here. But I'm going to try some paint. I have this really gold orange color. It's super pretty. With this I'm going to have to use a brush. So I'm still going to use the same stencil to try to pull it together. I'm going to blot my brush out so it's drier. This is a thicker paint, so I like it for stencils. You definitely don't want a watery paint when you're doing stencils because it'll bleed through and just look messy. Unless you want one that looks messy, I guess. So you're going to hold it down tight to the paper. If there's air between the stencil and the paper, your paint will bleed. And it just doesn't, you lose the really tight line if you do that. So when I pull this up, it's a little bit messier than my ink because it's a little bit wetter. I'm going to do something in the middle to make sure I don't overlap with that paint while it's drying. Alright, now even though it doesn't really look even, it's not centered, it doesn't matter because remember we're cutting it up into a lot of different pieces. So the key is to just make it really busy, try to keep the color scheme the same, and bring the elements across the whole thing so that when they're in the same book, you'll be able to see that they flow together, but you don't want them to be identical. Alright, I'm going to dry that part real quick before we use a different way of putting texture on. Alright, I think I want to knock back some of the space a little bit. There's a lot of pattern going on. And I still want the texture, but maybe have a little bit of blurred space. So I'm trying to mix some colors that are similar to what I see in the background. Kind of a mix of all the different colors that are in there. And then I'm going to use a dry brush. Now I can mix them together, or I can take a little bit of each color on my brush, depending on, you know, what your style is. You can dab it on to get a mix of different colors and kind of blend it. Or you can brush it and try to blend it that way. You can see how I'm taking like black and the brownish color on the same brush to try to blend it in. I think there may be a bit of a dog fight going on outside in my neighborhood right now. I don't know if you can hear that in the recording, but we have a few friends I call neighborhood dogs. Some people are more focused on keeping their dogs inside, and some are more focused on having their dogs outside, so we get a mix of personalities in our dogs. I guess I don't really like the white edge. That's what I end up feeling like. I want to knock it back a little bit. I don't really have a good gray that matches up to do the gray part very well, but I can do a little bit of this. Whatever you decide to do, we're going to put more layers on top of this, so don't worry about whether it looks perfect. It's all just layers in your masterpiece. Okay, it's looking a little weird, but that's okay. Beginning stages. I'm going to add some gold in here. I don't know if it helps, or it's definitely drawing the colors out that are on the other parts of the paper. Okay, I've definitely added a lot of randomness on here. Okay, moving on. I want to try to match this sort of odd yellow color of the old paper. I have caramel. I think it will be close, and I have a little bit of a antique white to add to it. I think I can alter the color a little bit to get that dirty yellow. It's getting close. I suppose I could want it to be just a little more yellow. That's pretty close, yeah. All right, let's do a little bit of this. Ooh, well, I'm gonna go for it. Ooh, I don't know if I like it or hate it. Probably should have tried the other stuff off more first, but here we go. Remember what I said about that baby wipe? It can take up the worst mistakes with paint when you least expect it to be helpful. Sometimes it looks like more of a mess than art until you get way closer to being done. And you really have to just go with your gut and enjoy the process, because in other words, you'll second guess yourself the entire time. I have a friend that came up to me today and said, "I'm just not crafty. I don't do anything like that." Thought, what a missed opportunity for her that she doesn't feel comfortable trying and just making a mess of it. I know my stuff is not perfect, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with like making a mistake and having it look ugly. And if other people don't like it, that's okay. I mean, I could get upset about it, but I just don't take it personally, because everybody's idea of what looks good is going to be different. And sometimes people I know will see what I'm working on and they will be like, "I just don't get what you're trying to do." But then when it's done, then they're like, "Oh yeah, now it makes sense why you did it the way you did." Maybe this doesn't look like it makes much sense, but I'm going to bring out some of these words a little bit more. not much left of this baby wipe. But you can see its beauty now. Make magic with the baby wipe. Trying to take away the more obnoxious lines and kind of have it fade in. No, it seems like we did all that work and then I erased it all, but it's the hint in the background that I want. Alright, I'm going to stop with that part. Now, I'm going to dry this mess. Some dots on using some bubble wrap. It's a great way to put polka dots without having to overthink it. I'm going to use a white, but it's an antique white. It's actually called antique parchment. I don't want a bright white because it will contrast what I've done too much. Alright, so I'm going to take my bubble wrap. This is actually a scrap of bubble wrap that something came wrapped in, so I'm just going to take a piece of it off. And find the bubbly side. And I'm going to paint my white onto the bubbly side. Now, I just need to decide where I want to break up that painting that I just put on there. So like here where I put a lot of dark, I'm going to want to add some dots in to give it a little more flavor. I'm going to put a fresh, you can get a couple of splats on there without having to re-ink, but I just want to make sure I get it right the first time. So I'm going to repaint it on. Just depends on how lazy I'm being, really, how much effort I put into painting this on. I'm gonna add some interest here, and then maybe there's a couple of other flat spots here. Not that I want 1,000 bubbles on here, but let's see. Maybe just a little bit, because there's a little bit of ink there already. Okay, that's done. Next, I want to take a little bit of black ink, and I have a just you can use almost any brush, but I like to use coarser bristles. So this has a little bit long of bristles and they're a little bit coarse, so they bounce back a little bit more. And then I'm going to take some black ink, just some flat black ink, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. And I'm going to mix it with a little bit of water. I just use scrap paper for my paint, and then I don't have to sit and scrub all my... I do have a fancy board for painting that I use sometimes, but Usually I just don't want to put the effort in to clean it. Now, if I don't want to get ink on something, I will cover it with a little piece of scratch paper. So in this case, I don't want to cover up the owl's face. And I don't want to cover up this little owl here. But the rest of it I'm pretty okay with. Maybe not the trees here, just because it's some pretty fine detail, but the rest of it is okay. So I'm going to put the brush above and I'm going to tap it and let the drops of paint go over the entire piece of paper. Now be careful, I get this all over my wall, but I don't care because it's in my room that I paint in. That's all I use this room for. So if you don't have a space like that, make sure you're on a table big enough and it's covered up enough that you're not going to end up with a spotted wall from it. Okay, now we can take our little pieces off and we're going to dry it one more time. Once your dots have dried, it's kind of up to how much more you want to add. You could just go with this, or if you want to add ink, I prefer to put a layer of gesso, clear gesso, over the top of it and to have that dry first, because ink will soak into your paper so fast. So if I want to add a little bit of ink to kind of bring the texture out, then I want to first get gesso on there and get it dried. So we'll do that and get it evenly distributed as best as possible. Make sure it's clear before you glob it on there. In other words, all that work will be for naught. Some people gesso the paper before they even get started, so they don't have it the paint soak in as much. I don't generally do that, but I have if I've done classes with people. Some artists, when they're teaching you, that's their very first step. I guess I've just gotten lazy about it, so it depends on what I'm putting down on the paper, whether I bother or when I bother to. So it looks like it's white, but once it starts to dry, it will turn clear. You want to make sure the paper is completely dry. You can run your hand across it and not have any sticky, because we're going to get it really wet. To make the ink roll around on the paper, you want to make sure that you have a layer of water across the sheet of paper. You should be able to see the water. If you look, it has a thin layer of water across the whole thing. So then when we drop some ink onto it, it instantly spreads in the water and doesn't soak up, doesn't overfill in one area. Once it's on there too, you can move it by spraying it with more water, or by, oh, I'm running out of water, I guess. You can tip it to get it to move into the grooves of the papers. Really, it will show a lot of the creases as it moves around on the paper. Where I have this bubble art, there's a lot of texture for it to grab hold of. I'm trying to avoid my owls just because I don't want them to be hidden by ink. I think that's good enough. And if I want to take it off of a certain area, you can either take like a piece of dry paper and soak it up, or you could use a baby wipe in that area. The gesso came up a little bit here, of course, on his face that I was trying to preserve. But that's okay. It'll still look cool, even with that little mistake. As I go to dry it, you'll see the water move. I'll probably block out the sound in the video, but I want you to be able to see how you can move the ink around as you dry it off. Well, we're in the home stretch now. I swear most of the time that I spend on these is getting them to dry. So usually when I work on a masterboard, I work on multiple masterboards at the same time. I'll get a table, I'll lay them all out and do the same phase on each page, let them all dry, and then do the next phase on all the pages, just because you'll drive yourself crazy trying to get them to dry multiple times, but it's worth it in the end. So the first thing I'm going to do with this dried sheet is I'm going to cut off all these weird edges that I made. So everywhere where I kind of went over the edge of the paper, I'm just going to cut those little pieces off. You could do this with scissors too. I just find it's a lot faster with some type of cutting board. I'm starting to get sniffly from the season sort of changing and then changing its mind again. Ooh, that didn't want to cut. I'll do it from this side. I'm noticing it's a little bit damp still. Alright, push it back a little bit here. There it goes. Okay. So now when we go to cut it into our varying shapes, it really just kind of takes shape as you go. Like, I know I want to be able to keep this owl here, so I'm going to try to make a pocket out of this owl. So I'm going to do 4 by 8. And I want him to be, let's see, piece like this. That's going to be the top. He's going to get covered. If I do it like this, he'll be the fold that's peeking down. So I'm going to cut this part off. And I'll show you right away what in the world I'm talking about. So I'm going to fold it up, crease it at the bottom, and then I'm going to fold it down so that the owl's face will peek through. So you end up with a pocket and a double pocket if you're really stealthy. You keep your image showing. So you can put something here, you can flip this up and this becomes a writing surface. So you're going to get some white paper or lined paper. I'm going to cut this coffee dyed paper. We're just going to go a little bit smaller than the square. And then this is going to get glued on. Let's see if it folds up. I'll have it like this. We'll just leave a little bit of a red line around the outside to kind of frame it. Glue that on. And I just use regular glitter glue for that. Glitter glue dries very quickly, so make sure you're holding it down. And then we're going to fold it again. So that way when it gets opened, you can write in it. Let's see, make sure that that sticks. Maybe I'll need a little bit more glue. Oh, there it goes. All right, I'm also going to glue right here so that it forms a pocket. I put the glue just on that one side, press it down, make sure you hold it while it's drying. And I'm actually going to clip it while it dries to make sure that that stays. The remaining 4x4 we can make into a pocket. I'm going to add a little bit of lace. I have some Halloween colors here. That might be a little too much. Maybe some black. That could work. You can always add little ephemera bundles on here. You can punch out the corners to make them rounded. You definitely want to use Fabri-Tac if you're going to put fabric or lace onto your paper. I'm actually going to put it on this side because I have a bit of a weird edge there. Fabri-Tac to glue some lace on. Now I could use this as the top and then round these bottom edges to make it look a little bit more of a finished pocket. And if I wanted to even go one step further, I can take some ink and I can ink around the outside edges to give it more of a dramatic line. So when I put it against the paper, it pops more. I'll show you in a sec. So if I put it on a page, it has a more dramatic line on the outside. I can do the same thing with the pocket that we just put together. I could round this edge if I wanted to give it a more finished look. I can ink it. There's a lot of corners on this one to ink though if you decide to ink them. It's a time commitment. I think I'm going to put a bit of lace along here, but it's got to be something that it can still fold up. It won't get in the way. I have this kind of lace. That wouldn't be too bad because I could just keep it on this side. I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'll cut it here. And then I'm going to just run a small line of Fabri-Tac. Careful not to get it on the owl. And this Fabri-Tac can be a bit gloppy. This is a pretty narrow edged Fabri-Tac bottle, and I still have to run it down and make it a little thinner, or else it will make your fabrics look wet. Push that in a little bit more so you can still see the owl, but it gives it a more finished edge. Alright, we got some more paper here to cut. I want to get at least one belly band. I want to get at least one belly band, which I usually like to take from the center because it's the most full image. And then I want to get a couple of bookmarks out of it. So let's do the belly band first. I'm going to do a full 12-inch belly band. I can always cut it down to size. It does not want to go in there. There we go. So if we do, this would be about 2 inches wide. I'm actually going to do 1.5, I think. Yeah, that should be good. 1.5. So there's our belly band. And then I'm going to do a couple of 6-ish inches bookmarks. That's a 2-inch wide one. I'm going to do another 2-inch wide. Okay, we've got 2. And now I need to make some other types of pockets. So you can make a longer one that folds in on itself. Maybe we'll use the owl for that. So if I fold it, you want to make sure that owl shows. So it's going to be about that far. So I'll go 2.5. So then this one, we're going to leave the background a little bit and fold it up. And this is one of those style where if you glue it in right, you can have a tuck here and a tuck here. I'm being careful in how I fold it. It's still a little bit tacky because I wanted to get this video recorded tonight and I was losing my patience with trying to dry it. So I think I'm going to round these top corners. There's not a lot of pattern on this back side, so we want to make sure that it looks as finished as possible. And then you can punch a dent into this. Sometimes you can put like a little tab in that to help people grab stuff. In this case, it's so shallow, I don't think we really need that. So I'm going to draw some glue on the edges here. If you hear bells ringing in the background, my dog is one of those dogs who's trained with bells and buttons to tell me what he needs, and the bell means he wants to go outside because he's bored. He does have a potty button, and he's not pressing the potty button, so it's really just that I'm not giving him attention right now. I'm giving you attention. And he can hear me in here talking to you or no one, whatever he thinks is happening. So I'm sure that's bugging him. Alright, so that's folded up. And this one can just be the way it is. It doesn't have to be fancy. This way it can be turned on the page this way. I do want to add something to this, something to pizzazz it up. So I have this. This is a really fun. Well, let's get this cutting board out of the way. Fabric Tack gives you a little bit more leeway to lay things out. It doesn't dry quite as quick as glitter glue, so you can move things around a little bit. But it's still a fast drying glue, so it's not a ton of time. Okay, I'm gonna set that aside. Now, this one's going to be laid like this. These will be like this. Okay. have a strip of lace already cut for this, so we're going to run the Fabri-Tac along that. Okay. I want to make sure the glue isn't sticking up out from underneath the lace. I'll make sure it covers it. Okay, we can set that one aside. Now this one, maybe I'll do a double. Ooh, that looks nice. Maybe I'll go right on the top or from behind. Yeah, maybe from behind. That looks pretty. There's really no wrong answer because it's just about preferences, right? Like, what I find pretty you might think looks horrible. I know I've watched YouTubers and yell at the screen going, no, don't ruin it, because they'll have it just perfect to my liking and then add something to it, and I'll be like, stop while you're ahead. But it ends up being exactly what they wanted, so it works out. Alright, with these ones, I am going to put a hole on the top to put string through. So I'll probably use this coming out of the hole. I want to glue the writing pieces in. So I'm just going to cut these to be about 5.5 inches by 1.5 inches, so I can glue it in here before I punch the holes, just to make sure that the eyelets will go through both pieces of paper. So it'll end up looking like this. And I can just use glitter glue for these because there's no fabric. Cost-wise, it doesn't really make a difference. The reason I tend to go to the glitter glue if I don't have to use the Fabri-Tac is just because I can get a finer point, so I don't waste as much glue, and I can spread it more easily without having to get it all over my fingers. I think I'm going to put it down a little bit so I can put the hole above the writing area. I like the way that looks better. I'm going to do the same thing here. Actually, I'm going to glue this side. I like a little bit of that messy print. I don't know if you can really see it through the camera, but there's just the finest little bit of stamping on there. Okay. Now I have a crock here that both punches the holes at the top and will put eyelets in. So I'm going to punch both holes first. And then I have many versions of eyelets here, so you can kind of pick whatever your favorites are. For shallow things like bookmarks, I have these flower ones that just look so cute. I'm going to put the flower so it's pointing out with the image, and the boring side will go where the writing goes. And when it's on there, then you use this tooth on the crocodile to put in the hole of the eyelet, and then you squeeze as hard as you can, and it will round it. We're going to do the same thing with this one. Snap them together. This type that has two sides, it just has a more finished look than the one-sided ones, but you can do it either way. So we have our eyelets in, and that just gives the ability for the lace that comes out of it to be pulled on and moved around without ripping the paper. So I'm going to pull the lace through, and I tend to make sure I can tie the knot before I cut it, even if it means I'll lose a little bit of lace to the garbage. Look at all the ink on my hands. Or it's actually, that's paint, but. Alright, I'm going to cut this off and pull it through. There's one. You can always cut that down if that seems too long. The next thing I'm going to do is trim things down. So wherever there's lace kind of hanging off, or I feel like it's too long, I'm going to cut it down to the size I want it to be. Sometimes you don't know till you see how it hangs off. So we have our two bookmarks. This I'm going to cut down just a little bit. Got some extra ends on this one too. This one looks, oh yeah, it's a little bit of a hangover. So we'll just clean that up. We have this pocket that we did a long time ago. And this would be our last. We can take this off. Now when we open it, we can write in it and close it. And usually with something like this, I have a paper clip that I put on it. I have one bigger paper clip here that we can kind of use for an example. So you'd put like a big paper clip there, and then they'd pull the paper clip off. And a lot of times you can put like a paper clip with like maybe some lace hanging off of it or some beads. And then this is a tuck. So we could tuck in here, we can tuck in this one, and in this one. All kinds of options. You can write on the back of these ones. So this all came from one sheet of paper. Look at that. And it only took, I don't know, a couple hours. But when you do a lot of them and you're not explaining it the whole time, it goes a lot faster, I promise. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you have a blast making these on your own.